Michael D. Cohen, President Trump's one-time lawyer and fixer, was in good spirits on Thursday when he arrived at a Manhattan federal courthouse, where he expected to complete routine paperwork related to his home confinement amid the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Cohen, who was released from prison in May on a medical furlough, was stunned when probation officers asked him to sign a document that would have barred him from speaking to reporters or publishing a book during the rest of his sentence, his legal advisor said. Mr. Cohen, believing the agreement violated his First Amendment rights, refused to sign it, the advisor, Lanny Davis, said. Less than 2 hours later, federal marshals stepped out of an elevator with handcuffs and took Mr. Cohen back into custody. Mr. Cohen's return to jail was the latest twist in a case whose dizzying ups and downs have prolonged the legal woes of a man who once said he would take a bullet for Mr. Trump and later implicated the president in federal crimes. In a statement, the Federal Bureau of Prisons said that Mr. Cohen had been returned to jail after he refused the conditions of his home confinement. As a federal inmate, the Bureau said in a separate statement, Mr. Cohen must comply with Bureau policies, including requirements that he consent to electronic monitoring and obtain approval for any media interviews. Last week, Mr. Cohen said on Twitter that he anticipated releasing a book in late September. Mr. Davis said on Thursday that the book was ready for publication and would recount Mr. Cohen's experiences working for Mr. Trump for years. Mr. Cohen testified before Congress last year that he had previously turned down a deal worth around $750,000 to sell a book about his time working for Mr. Trump that was tentatively titled, Trump Revolution, From the Tower to the White House, Understanding Donald J. Trump. As part of his home confinement, probation officers asked Mr. Cohen on Thursday to agree to a long list of conditions, including a prohibition against speaking to reporters, posting on social media and publishing any books. Mr. Cohen told the officers that he had been talking to reporters while he was in prison, Mr. Davis said. After Mr. Cohen refused to sign the agreement, the probation officers said they would try to work out a resolution, Mr. Davis said. Mr. Cohen and another of his lawyers, Jeffrey Levine, waited about 90 minutes, Mr. Davis said. Then 3 federal marshals appeared to arrest Mr. Cohen with no warning. At that point, Mr. Davis said, Mr. Cohen relented and agreed to sign the document to avoid going back to jail. The marshals continued to take him into custody anyway, Mr. Davis said, with one of them saying, "It's out of our hands." A spokesman for the U.S. Marshals Service did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Mr. Cohen was brought to a federal detention facility in the city, according to 2 people briefed on his legal status. Mr.